Are you a Toronto realtor and looking to take your business to the next level? Welcome to Toronto Realtor Resource Center. If you're a real estate professional in Toronto or surrounding area, then this podcast is for you. If you're looking to take your business to the next level, stay tuned everyone. This show will bring you all the tools, tips, and resources to help you crush it in your marketplace. Each week, I'll be bringing in Toronto's top minds, such as top-performing realtors, educators, coaches, and many other industry-related professionals in order to tap into their arsenal of resources to help you take your real estate business to the next level. I'm Leo Falkowski, mortgage broker with Dominion Lending Centers Mortgage Loans Canada. As a top mortgage broker for over 20 years, realtors have been instrumental in my personal success, and this show is my tribute to you.
Welcome back to another awesome episode, and this week we have Whitney Nicely, a real estate investor hailing from Knoxville, Tennessee. For those who don't know Whitney, she went from no investments or strategies to 19 houses, 19 apartment units, and 7 chunks of land in less than 3 years, all bringing monthly income to her bank account on autopilot. She has traveled to the U.S. speaking on stages, teaching her simple strategies, and meeting with other successful real estate investors, and still buying houses the way she teaches others. Whitney's knowledge of real estate investment is sought after as she teaches people how to buy their first investment house in 12 weeks or less with no money or banks. Since 2016, Whitney has led and trained hundreds of future real estate rock stars to grow their portfolios, collect checks, and achieve financial freedom. Hundreds of real estate newbies are securing leads, signing deals, and scaling their dreams through income with Whitney's REI Rockstar program, which we'll get a bit more into this episode. Whitney has been featured on Entrepreneur on Fire and GSD Mode this year. She has also collaborated on 2 books and published her own real estate dictionary. But before we go ahead and dive into this episode, as many of you may have heard another set of mortgage rules. Since 2008, the federal government has made several changes to the rules for government-backed insured mortgages. These have included reducing the amortization period, increasing minimum down payment, and requiring banks to stress test borrowers who have a down payment of less than 20% using the Bank of Canada's conventional 5-year fixed posted mortgage rate. Last month, the Office of Superintendent of Financial Institutions, otherwise known as OFSI, the banking regulator, went a step further. As of January 1st, 2018, all borrowers working with a federally regulated lender must meet the mortgage stress test no matter what the down payment percentage. Borrowers will have to meet the requirement of either the 5-year fixed posted rate or 2% higher than the actual mortgage rate, whichever is higher. Today, a big bank is offering a 5-year fixed close mortgage of $349 approximately. The Bank of Canada lists the rate for 5-year conventional mortgage at 4.89%. So in this case, a borrower would have to qualify at $549, 2% to 3.49. The stress test assumes a borrower would have to pay back the loan at the posted average, not at whatever discounted rate they are able to negotiate. At present, the new stress test won't apply when renewing a mortgage with the same lender. Wondering how the new rules could affect you or your buyer clients? Give me a shout or my team and we will talk. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. Whitney, so excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Leo. This is going to be fun.
I am super excited. Anytime I get in front of anybody that has anything to do with real estate and finance, coming from a finance background myself, I am stoked to learn and hear what others are doing south of the border. Our audience here are mainly Canadian realtors, but we're always up for learning. So for those who haven't heard about you, maybe give us a little intro about yourself, your background, and what you've been up to lately.
Hey, y'all. My name is Whitney Nicely, and I am a broker for Whitney Buys Houses, but I don't do regular real estate. So I'll try to keep the realtor comments to a minimum, but I buy houses, and I teach agents how to buy houses and, maybe use those commissions towards a retirement, maybe use no commissions and still be able to buy houses. So I do kind of weird real estate.
Yeah, so talk to us about that. How did you get into that? And what, in your definition, do you mean as weird?
My mom has always been a real estate investor, so I had a strong female presence growing up, and I don't think everybody had that. So I try to teach women that it's okay. You can go out and buy houses. You can be a landlord. You can do whatever it is that you really have in your heart to do. But I started flipping houses during the recession in '09 with my parents, and I fell in love with the process. I fell in love with the strategy. But what I didn't like is how slow they were. So I wanted to pick it up a notch and take it on full steam ahead. So in 2014, I started flipping houses by myself. And what would take 6 months in parent time took me about 6 weeks in Whitney time.
Now, you specialize specifically in your state, Nashville, Tennessee, or do you go in other parts of the U.S. as well?
I'm actually in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm in East Tennessee. It's God's country. Nashville is mostly for rich people or, what they talk about on the news a lot. So I vacation in Nashville sometimes, but I buy in Knoxville. And 16 of my houses are in Knoxville or outside of Knoxville. My apartments are in greater Knoxville. My land is all throughout East Tennessee, and my husband lives in Georgia, so I have started buying houses in Georgia as well.
And what type of real estate do you look for personally, and has that differed from when you initially started out?
No, when I started, my mom has houses. She has commercial property. She has industrial property. She doesn't have any apartments. She doesn't have any mobile home parks, but she does have a landfill. So I was exposed to everything from houses to landfills, and I buy everything from houses to industrial property. I don't have a landfill yet, but I do have industrial property, and it's actually one of my favorite pieces of real estate that I own. It's just a half-acre piece of industrial land. I paid $1,500 for it at an auction, and I rent it for $750 a month, just the land, no building.
Sweet. How would you find a deal like that?
It was at auction, and I hang out at auctions. I'm on a lot of different auctioneers' email lists, and I found out about properties that everybody has the ability to find. I just bid on it.
Now, for some of us that are north of the border here, we are not too familiar with auctions. How does that work? Are they publicly listed? Do you have to become part of a membership? How do you find out about these auctions?
They're just like MLS properties. They're just like listed properties. So the auctioneers here will put it up on a website, and it goes out to their email address. It goes out on, Facebook ads and Google ads. They put ads in the newspaper. I mean, everybody has the opportunity to know that something's going up for auction. If you're going to buy something at auction, though, I encourage people to look at absolute auctions, because an absolute auction means it is absolutely going to sell for the highest price on that day at that time. If it doesn't say absolute, then there could be a reserve price, and if the reserve isn't met, it won't sell.
What's the distinction between an absolute auction and a regular auction for those who don't know?
They have to advertise an absolute auction as absolute. If it doesn't say absolute auction, there's a chance there's a reserve.
I see. Now, is this available in all parts of the states or just in your local area?
No, that's nationwide.
Right on. And this is open to realtors, to non-realtors, everyone alike, correct?
Oh, yeah. Everybody that wants to buy it can come. You don't have to be represented. You don't have to have a license. Anybody. It's public auction. You can go and buy whatever it is you want, bid as much as you want.
Right on. So maybe walk us through your first experience, how you got started out, and what was your first deal like, and what did that look like?
My very first deal was a piece of land, and I bought it at auction for $1,200. When we got to the closing table later that week, there was something on the paperwork that said $69,000, and I was like, hold up, wait a minute. I don't want to pay $69,000. They were like, no, this was a foreclosure auction. The person who had this property mortgaged had paid $69,000 for it, or they were on the note to pay $69,000, and I got it all in, all done for $1,200.
And how would a property end up on auction? Would that be like a distress sale? Would somebody be in financial turmoil and couldn't carry the mortgage on that? How would it end up on that list?
Well, for a foreclosure, it has to go through, and this was a local community bank that had properties that people hadn't been making the payments on. So they just took them to auction and sold them all one day. So they were trying to offload their books before the end of the year. But foreclosure auctions, that's what people normally think of as auctions. Most of the time, auctions are just a really fast way to sell something.
Right.
When you put a property up and you say, hey, this thing's for sale, you're kind of just waiting on somebody to come through and maybe they'll make an offer. And it's just kind of a lollygag situation. When you say we're going to sell it on the 15th at 3:00, everybody who might kind of sort of have an interest in it will be there on the 15th at 3:00 and somebody's going to go home with it.
Got it. So do you look at specifically only properties that are listed at auction, or do you have other means and methods of finding properties?
No, when I started, I was only looking at auction. The first house I bought was at auction, and because that's all I knew. My mom would go to auctions and buy properties, or she would find for sale by owner properties. We never really bought anything off the MLS. In fact, the first time she bought something that was listed, I kind of followed along the process. And when we got to the closing table and I saw how much that agent had made and I saw what little work he had done to make that commission, I was like, I left that closing table determined to get my real estate license. So that's why I got a license. I thought if anybody's going to make that much money off my mom, it's going to be me.
Right.
And then she didn't buy anything off the MLS anymore. And I got bored. So I started buying stuff, but I still didn't buy anything off the MLS. Everything I find is off market properties, straight seller to buyer, no middleman or anything like that.
Tell us about off market. What is that like? Is that how do you hear about it, and where do you go for information about that?
Well, it's not as easy as finding stuff on the MLS. I mean, when stuff goes up on the, multiple listing service, it's practically served to you on a silver platter. You have to work to go find off-market properties, and I've got about 14 different ways that I go about finding them. 6 ways online and 8 ways offline. I mean, you can look for sale by owner signs. You can go driving for dollars and look for empty houses. You can mail yellow letters that basically say, hey, your house looks like crap. I want to buy it. Call me quickly. You can put an ad up on Craigslist that says, hey, I'm looking to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Dandridge. Y'all call me if you got something. You can put I buy a lot off Facebook, actually, and not from boosted posts or sponsored posts, from my friends and family. I got like 12 different templates of posts that I put up. And if I will stick those posts every 12 days, I'll get in front of 6 sellers.
Interesting. And how much money initially would one require to get in? Maybe walk us through the micro steps, like what costs are required to acquire the property and what price points are popular in your state.
Most of our houses are between 100 and 150,000. And I don't go to the banks. Nobody pulls my credit. I do seller financing, owner financing, or I do lease options. So I've taken control of a $120,000 house with a $10 check.
Oh, wow. We are not familiar with those concepts. So maybe Whitney, give us a little bit background on that. Like just give us some micro steps. What is seller financing or lease option? Is that like own to rent or rent to own type of deal, or what does that look like?
They're 2 different things. So in owner financing or seller financing, that's when the house is free and clear. There's no mortgage on it. They own it outright and they do the financing for me. So I don't have to have bank financing. I don't have to have a mortgage broker. I don't have to have an appraiser. They say, I want 100,000. I say, fine, I'll give you 100,000. If you'll give me 30 years to pay you off, I'll give you X amount per month.
Got it. Yeah, we call it like free and clear vendor take-back mortgage here in Canada, which in other words is basically seller finance. And what are the typical terms on a seller finance or vendor take-back? Would the seller charge, say, bank rates? Would they go higher than regular bank rates? What would the payment structure look like?
I get 0% interest.
Wow.
Because I'm usually giving them their asking price. And I I use a little bit of my Southern charm and a couple of questions that I've developed that really lets them know that I'm here to play ball. And I show them why it's better to do 0% interest than to be greedy and try to, do other things, and then how they're going to get taxed if they do charge interest, and how I can give them maybe even $5,000 more if they don't charge me interest, which is still going to save me in the long run.
Love it. Now, what would be the exit strategy on something like that? They're asking, say, 120,000. You give them the full 120,000. There's 0% seller financing. How long would you hold on to that property, and what would be the exit strategy?
The longest one I've gotten was 15 years, and these people actually called me and said, "Hey, Whit, we heard you like owner financing houses. We've got one, and we'd like to give you 15 years on it with no interest if you'd give us everything that we paid for it originally."
Right. And would you then rent that house out to someone?
On that house, I do, because it was a very easy negotiation. They pretty much gave me everything I wanted, and I didn't have to ask for anything. So I agreed to it, and I put a regular renter in it because I want to do a 1031 exchange. And I normally sell stuff on lease options, but I've been told that I can't do a 1031 if it's with a lease option. So in this particular house, I do have a regular renter in it.
And what kind of cash flow can one see on, say, a $120,000 purchase? Like, what kind of monthly rent would you fetch on a property like that?
On this particular house, my payment is $500 a month, and I get $850 a month. So I get $350 a month.
Sweet. That's a $350 a month profit, everyone listening in. So you're basically going in zero down. What about closing costs, land transfer tax, and legal fees, or that's not required because everything is typically...
That is required because it is owner financing, seller financing, and the title is transferring to my name. So that is required. But it's not much because you still don't have origination fees. You still don't have all these other people and underwriters and all this fluff stuff. Like if you go to the bank. If you go to the bank, it's going to be at least 5%, maybe $5,000, $6,000 to get this done. For me, it's just transfer tax.
Gotcha. Now, let's say the property is not free and clear and you just want to purchase out a property. What would be the more orthodox means of purchasing, or you don't practice the orthodox way?
No, I don't believe in it.
Right on. And
I don't know how anybody makes any money like that. I could get a $120,000 house on a lease option for no money down. I'll take over somebody's payment. Say their payment's $800 a month. I'll take that over after 3 payments. So I've got 3 months to advertise it, and I'll get it for whatever they owe on it. Let's say they owe $100,000, but it's worth $120,000. Okay. So my purchase price is $100,000. I put no money down. I get $800 a month payment on it. Mm-hmm. And I've got, let's say, 5 years to pay it off or clear it out.
Oh, okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, it's kind of similar to, are you familiar with lease busters for vehicles?
No.
Okay, so it's kind of like you own a lease, right? Let's say you lease, a BMW or an Infiniti. Your payments are $600 a month. It's a 4-year lease term, and for whatever reason you can't carry it. So there's a website here in Canada called Lease Busters where you basically find someone to take over that lease. So essentially, Whitney, am I understanding correctly? You're kind of taking over that lease on a lease option for the house?
I'm taking over the mortgage. It's not a lease. The people actually have the mortgage on it. I am a glorified renter. I'm a glorified tenant.
Right. So I'm just using lease as an analogy. Forgive the term, but I get it. You're basically taking over the mortgage, kind of like taking over a car lease payment. But in your case, you're taking over the mortgage payment, property taxes, and all the associated expenses of that house, and then renting out that house either to another party or back to the family currently living in that property.
Oh, no. Always to another person. Always to another person, because I'm going to find somebody that has maybe $10,000 and they'll give me $10,000 to move in. They'll pay me $1,000 or $1,200 a month. So I'll make $10,000 because I didn't put any money down, and I get $10,000 when somebody moves in. I get the spread between my payment and whatever they pay me every month. And then I bought it for $100, but I can sell it. It's worth $120. So whenever these people go get their mortgage, I'll get another $20,000.
Oh, sweet. Love that.
So on a $100,000 house, I mean, if you listed that and you got 6% commission, you'd get $6,000. I'm going to get 10,000 when somebody moves in. I'm going to get between 200 and 400 every month for a year or two. And then I'm going to get another $20,000 when these people go get a mortgage. And if they don't, I'll just find somebody else to give me $10,000 and pay me again.
Brilliant, brilliant. So our audience, I mean, is mainly realtors, and I'm in mortgages for the last 17 years. And so many times I get the question, well, what if I don't have enough down payment, or if my income isn't enough, or my credit is shoddy, or I owe too much debt? The strategy you're speaking about would be perfect, ideal for that type of client. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, it's awesome because nobody pulls my credit. Nobody looks at my debt to income. I really am a glorified tenant, and then I'm a glorified landlord. Like, I've got 19 houses now, and most of those, some of them I have free and clear because I've used, when people give me a $10,000 option fee, I turn around and pay off a house, you know? So I've ended up with some free and clear houses with somebody else's money. So
Right.
I don't have a lease option on all of them, but most of them I do have a lease option on. And I just find other people that I can, help make money. And it's a great way to find, sellers, because lots of sellers have houses that they're making the payments on, even if they're not living in it, because they don't want to be a landlord. They don't want to have the responsibility or the upkeep or the headaches. So they just make a payment on it and forget about it. They'll skip their vacation every year because they know they got to make this payment. And
Right.
instead of fixing it or listing it or whatever, I find those people and I say, hey, I can make this pain stop. I can take this payment away from you. And they're like, okay, thank you. Just take it. Whatever it is you do, go do it.
Gotcha, gotcha. And what techniques do you use? Like, do you screen and find your own tenants, or
Yeah.
do you hire a property manager to look after that, or what does that
No,
look like?
I don't need a property manager because when I put my tenant buyers into the house, I give them all the maintenance and upkeep and repairs because they are coming in as a buyer, not as a regular renter. So my program is a bridge program, and I teach them that, when they get their mortgage, they're not going to call the bank if the toilet gets clogged. So don't call me. This is a practice run, buddy.
That's it. And what best practices have you learned over the years in terms of finding and qualifying a good tenant?
You mentioned people that said they didn't have any money. When I find tenant buyers, if they don't have at least $10,000, they're not going to work for me. And I'm very open and honest about that. And I don't care. They'll either come up with $10,000 or they're not my puppy. I just don't feel sorry for them. So I take that back. I have a couple houses that are only worth $10,000. So, in that case, it doesn't matter to me. But most of the time when we're talking about regular happy houses and happy little neighborhoods, I need at least 10,000 to move in. I
Right.
want 10% when they move in. And I don't get down payments. Okay. Mortgage brokers like yourself, y'all get down payments. I get non-refundable option fees. And if you leave, it's non-refundable.
Got it.
It's not a security deposit. It's not a down payment. It's a non-refundable option fee.
Now, do you look at income? Do you look at credit, or that's
We're
secondary?
required to do, there's a law, Dodd-Frank, and we're required to have a third party screen our tenants. And so I've got a company out of Pennsylvania, and they screen all of my tenants for me. It's free to me. The tenants pay $50 per person, and I find out their credit. I find out their debt to income. I find out their employment verification. I know if they're on the sex offender list. I know their criminal history. I know everything about them except their underwear color before they move in.
And what's the name of that service once again?
It's Screen the Tenant.
Screen the tenant. Got it. I'll include that in the show notes. And in terms of paperwork, do you have a lawyer doing that? Do you draft your own, or what does that look like?
I have 3 or 4 contracts that I use. I mostly have a one-pager lease option agreement, and it's something that my attorney drafted up for me because we couldn't find a contract that really served what I needed, and I needed it in regular English, not in attorney language. So we drafted it up, and I use it all the time. I use it for my sellers. I use it for my buyers. It's just a fill-in-the-blank kind of contract. So I use that. And once I have it signed from my seller and I found a tenant buyer, I send both contracts to my attorney so that he can review it, and he will turn this 2-page agreement that I have with the seller and with the buyer into like a 25-page agreement with the seller and the buyer, 2 different agreements. But he attorneyizes it all for me. And I close everything with an attorney because I want every single one of my deals to have somebody's stamp of approval on it that says, I did everything I was supposed to do. They're doing everything they're supposed to do. And all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted.
What I love the most about you, Whitney, is not only do you do this for yourself, your family, and, simply hoard the information like some people would, you actually share and teach people how to do this as well. When did you get involved in that?
Last year, I had somebody that offered to pay me $5,000 to work with me. And I was like, okay. And then once other people found out that I was teaching, suddenly people I didn't even know were sending me messages like, hey, how can I get in your program? How can I get in your program? And I was like, I don't have a program. And they were like, well, you need one because I want to pay you. How much is it? And I was like, hold on, wait a minute. Let me get this together. So over the last year, I worked one-on-one or in a group coaching atmosphere with people. And I've taken all the videos and all the worksheets and all the contracts and everything that I've learned from teaching people and everything that my students have learned and what's worked for them. And I've compiled it into one self-study course now. So I am a real coach.
Love it. It reminds me of Robin Sharma, the book, The Leader Without a Title. You're kind of like that leader without a title, but you slowly are getting a title. So do you consider
I'm a real estate matchmaker. At first, I was finding sellers who needed buyers, and I was finding buyers who needed sellers. But now I'm also finding people who want to become investors and helping them become real estate matchmakers.
So who would be your ideal client to work with?
I love agents, especially at some point. I think every agent wakes up and says, hold on, what am I doing? And how much am I getting paid? And how much of this am I keeping? And how much am I paying out? And what is my retirement going to look like? At some point, every agent wakes up and says that. And at that point, it clicks in their head that, oh, wait, I should be buying some of these houses too, instead of just listing them and selling them.
This is real outside the box thinking, Whitney. I commend you for that because real estate school doesn't teach us to think outside the box. They teach us to think how they teach us to run business. But this is really refreshing, and I want to be your student. I want to know how to learn more. How do I, and anyone listening in as part of my audience wants to be your student, how can they learn more?
You can go to whitneynicely.com. I've got tons of stuff up there, but I'm really mouthy on Facebook. I do at least one little video a day sharing some real estate tips and tricks and ideas and inspiration and sometimes motivation. And you can go to whitneynicely.com/group and it'll reroute you over to my Facebook group.
Love it. WhitneyNicely.com. Just like the name Nicely, she is nice. So take advantage, you guys, and be generous to Whitney. Maybe give our audience a story that sticks out fresh in your mind, either a good story or a not so good story.
Oh, I've got tons of these. Let's go with my first lease option deal. So I found a seller. They put their house up on Zillow for sale by owner. And I called him and said, hey, I want to come look at it. And I went and talked to him, and I learned that they had a problem. What had happened was they bought this house as a retirement home, and then their daughter came home pregnant unexpectedly. And the house wasn't big enough for 4 people. So they were under a time crunch, like a literal clock ticking down as to they needed a bigger house. And they didn't have time to list it. They didn't have time to, do anything else. They needed to focus on getting their family situated for this new baby coming in. And so I said, all right, fine. I'll take over the payments and I'll buy this house for what you owe. No big deal. So they owed $122. Their payment was like $800. Like, I talk about this story inadvertently all the time, but they owed $122. The payment was $800 a month. They gave me 5 years to pay it off, and everybody was fine. They were actually living in the house, and I kicked these people out. I told them I wouldn't start my clock, my 90-day clock, before I made the first payment until they were out of the house. And they were out of this house in less than a week.
Interesting.
So I put the house back up on, they had it on Zillow for $135. I put it back up on Zillow for $145, thinking, I'll make a little bit of money. Well, a couple in Chicago had seen it go up for $135, and they called and they said, hey, we want to buy this house for $135, but now it's $145. What happened? I said, oh, well, I bought it. And they're like, dang it. All right, well, how can we still get it for $135? Like, how much did you pay for it? And I was like, I I guess, because I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. And I'd probably still do this now, even though I do know what I'm doing. I was like, I guess you can have it for 135, but I want you to come down and see it, make sure you want it. And they were like, fine. So they came down the next week, looked at it, and they said, okay, here's the deal. We've got our house in Chicago for sale. Whenever it sells, we'll cash out this house. And I was like, okay, that's fine, but I don't know if that'll take 6 months. I don't know if that'll take a year. I don't know if that'll take 2 weeks. And they said, well, we'll do your lease option on it, and we'll basically rent it until our house closes. And I said, okay, it'll be $1,000 a month. And they said, fine, no problem. So they gave me $2,000 right then and paid for the middle of March. So they paid for 2 months, middle of March to middle of April to middle of May. And they called me the next day. So they paid 2 months in advance. I didn't have a payment due until June because I got the house in February. So I didn't have a payment due until June. And I already made $2,000 when I didn't have anything due. I had a $10 check involved on this house. They called me the next day after they gave me $2,000 and they said, hey, we got a contract on our house in Chicago. We're going to close in May. And I was like, okay, but if you don't, we'll just do like a month-to-month rent on this thing until it does close. And they said, okay, fine. So they started moving their stuff out of the Chicago house down to Tennessee. And in the middle of May, 1st of May, they closed on their house in Chicago. I have no idea how much they sold it for, but they came down to Tennessee and we closed the middle of May for $135,000 on this house.
Wow.
So I made $13,000. I bought it for $122,000. They bought it from me for $135,000. I did not have a payment due until June. They paid me 2 months rent in advance while they moved stuff down into the house. So I made $15,000 in like 10 weeks on a $10 check.
Not bad at all. And I appreciate you sharing that story with us. And I may have asked, but do you specialize only in the Tennessee area or other states as well?
I also buy in Georgia. My husband lives in Georgia, so I spend quite a bit of time there. But I love East Tennessee.
And would your techniques work in any part of the states or specifically Tennessee and Georgia?
Oh, no, they work everywhere.
Everywhere in the states,
It'll
right?
even work in Canada.
Right. So do you work with agents outside your state as well as some provinces in Canada, or are you sticking only to Tennessee and Georgia yourself right now?
No, my students are in California, they're in New York, they're in Florida, they're in Texas, they're in Wisconsin. My students are all over the states. I don't have anybody in Hawaii or Alaska yet, but I do have a student in New Zealand and I have a student in Costa Rica. I've got 2 ladies in Spain.
Well,
it works everywhere.
You're just about to acquire a new Canadian, so get ready.
Yay! Yay!
Will be an experiment. But
awesome.
No, thank you for sharing that with us, Whitney. Where, outside of Whitney, your website, I'll link that up into the show notes. Is there anything I could have asked you that I should have and didn't?
I tell everybody to just keep going. If it's a good deal or if it's a bad deal, if you're in a low spot or if you're on top of the mountain, keep going. There's more out there for you, whether you're, kind of stuck in that, clear to close rat race, or whether you're starting to get into investing and it's a new thing and you're kind of scared. Keep going with it because your dreams are real. And the only way to achieve them is to keep going.
Amen. And just in wrapping up before we say goodbye, can you give us a glimpse about the economy in the state of Tennessee or Georgia right now? How have housing trends looked like?
I have been buying on the lower end of the market because everything on the higher end of the market is outside of my comfort zone right now. I think things are a little bit crazy. So I'm going on the lower end right now where I can grow when the market cools.
So am I understanding that the market has been heated for the last little bit?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. What percent increases have you seen in the past couple of years?
I don't know. I'm not good with numbers. I just know that people are paying way too much for stuff that it just seems crazy to me. I don't know where everybody's getting all this money all of a sudden, but they're getting it. And that means while everybody's looking high, I'm going low.
Good for you.
And then when people start looking low, I'll be everywhere.
Right.
Everybody will be buying from me when they start looking low again.
Right. Yeah, because the Canadian market in the last couple of years has been absolutely bonkers. We had a huge influx of foreign investors, lots of
Yeah.
recent round of rule changes. Are you seeing a large influx of foreign money coming in?
I am not personally. I kind of do the opposite of what the crowd is doing. If you can't tell that, if everybody's going to the middle of the city and there's a bunch of foreign money coming in, I'm going straight out to the suburbs. And then when people start to come to the suburbs, I go further into the suburbs. I try to stay away from where everything is really hot, where everything is really, competitive. I like to be the only person playing in my little playground.
Kind of like Warren Buffett.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes, got to learn from the greats. Well, listen, Whitney, you've added immense value to myself, our audience here today. I want to thank you so, so much for being generous with your time today, and much, much continued success to you in the future.
Thanks, Leo.
All the best. Take care.
If you enjoyed this, if you got value, join our private Facebook group called Toronto Realtor Resource Center. For complete show notes to this episode, check out leofalkowski.com and click on our mortgage section offering the most competitive rates and programs our industry has to offer. Never lose a real estate transaction over financing ever again. Until next time, stay great, everyone.